Justice Barrett.
So, Mr. Mubin, when you were having this colloquy with Justice Kavanaugh, y'all were talking post by post. The Chief Justice asked you at the start, are we looking at this as whose account is it, or are we looking at specific actions? It kind of sounded to me when you were talking to Justice Kavanaugh that your position, which I kind of understood your initial position to be, no more, we're looking at the account, but which is it?
So I think it's true that you're looking at the account and the blocking, but as I told the Chief Justice at the very end of our colloquy and now with Justice Kavanaugh, if you use the account, even in part for what is an exclusive governmental duty to give notice to the public or engage with the public, I agree at that point it's going to be state action. The reason why I think it's important to think about this at the account level is there's a lot of speech that might be viewed as official, but isn't an official duty to provide information to people in like the hypotheticals Justice Kavanaugh was asking me. And so a way of differentiating the two. Announcing, for example, that I'm going to sign a bill, announcing I'm going to appoint a judge. Those sort of things are things you could do even if you view those as official in some sense. That doesn't mean that you're using the property where you make that speech in an official capacity. You can engage in that type of speech at a campaign rally, at a church, in your backyard.
So we are kind of looking post by post, I think.
If you're talking about exclusive duties, I agree.
Okay. And I have a question about this word duty. So what is the point of talking about both duty and authority? Because it seems to me that duty, and this kind of runs throughout the brief, sometimes it's described as obligations. You described it just now as an exclusive government duty, a requirement that appears sometimes in the briefs. But sometimes there are things you have the authority to do as a government official that you're not required or obligated to do. So it seems to me that if you have the authority to do them, something that you have a duty to do is just a subset of authority. So why are we talking about duty?
So look, I think you're right that duties and authorities in some sense are flip sides of the same coin in general, and that you can have exercises of authority that are permissive but not required. So I agree with all that. I think authority does add something beyond duty. I think what it's helpful most for is things like the use of staffing, the use of resources, things like that don't really directly go to the question of is it duty, but it is the wielding of authority. Now that sort of thing is relevant for two reasons. One, it's good evidence that you're wielding a duty or authority if you're using government resources or staffing. And two, it's possible that at least in some cases, the mere use of those resources alone could be state action.
See, I mean, I guess I just think using the word authority, I mean, I get, and then in the Sixth Circuit case, that's what the opinion seems to be. That's the, I don't know, that's the value of authority, I think, in the Sixth Circuit opinion. But it just seems to me like a weird way to describe it. I think of it more as evidence, right? Yeah. I mean, am I losing a whole lot if I don't want to use the word duty and if I just say authority? Maybe that would pick up some of that stuff that you're talking about anyway?
I don't think you're losing a lot. I think you could frame it either way. As I said, I think they are flip sides of the same coin.
Okay, you were talking a lot about property, which is the government's focus. So you've articulated the test. As Justice Gorsuch said, we have lots of articulations on offer on your side of the V. What is the difference? What's the daylight between the government's position and your position? You know, their focus on, is this private property that the public official is inviting you onto? You know, the test that they propose versus the authority, duty, control test that you do.
So I don't actually think there's any daylight between our positions, though you can ask my friend. They've obviously emphasized property as sort of this initial gating mechanism, whereas we view the fact that it's private property as quite relevant to determining are you exercising duties or authorities of your office. But at the end of the day, I think the cases all sort of cash out the same way. Whether you apply our framework or theirs, you essentially end up in a spot where if you're using a private account and you're not exercising an exclusive governmental function and you're not using government resources and the government can't control it, then you should understand that to be acting in your personal capacity, because people have the right as government officials to talk about their jobs in their personal capacity. And you should assume that when they do that on their own personal property, they're acting in their personal capacity.
Okay, last question. At the beginning of your argument, you referred to unless someone is choosing to use their Facebook account, Twitter account, whatever, in their official capacity. And Justice Kagan's questions were getting to some of this. I think it's very difficult when you have an official who can in some sense define his own authority. So I think for a governor or, President Trump, it's a harder call than someone like a police officer who's a subordinate. Or I could, my law clerk could just start posting things and say this is the official business of the Barrett Chambers, right? And that wouldn't be okay. But if, that wouldn't be okay. If, Governor Newsom decides to do it, he has the authority to define the scope of his authority. I would have thought in your client's context, they don't actually have full-ranging authority just as board members, right? Unless the board said, we've taken a vote and you are the one who's our communications person. You are the point person on communications. Then you would look at a source of authority. But if in that context, I guess it just kind of depends official by official. I guess I'm not understanding in your specific for your client why there would be an argument even. It seemed like you were conceding a little bit and talking to Justice Kavanaugh about official announcements and that sort of thing. Would that be true for your clients?
Yes. I think if my clients, if for example there was a slush fund at the board to, use money for doing your job, and my clients use that money to buy a Facebook account or use advertising on Facebook, I don't think my clients would be acting in an ultra-virus fashion, and I think that would be exercising state action. Now, I do agree with you, Your Honor, that on the control piece of using control as evidence of whether it's governmental or not, it becomes harder the higher up you go in the chain because it's harder to identify a superior who can tell you what to do. But even take, for example, the governor of California. Well, the governor of California does have a boss. The boss is the people of the state of California who could, for example, amend their constitution. And they could amend their constitution and say that even the governor, when he's exercising his official capacity, here's what he can and cannot say on a social media page. And they certainly could not do that for this sort of page, for a page that he owned before he was the governor, that he will own after he's the governor, and that he uses only to say things that under Lane he has a First Amendment right to say in his individual capacity.